All right, so we are doing trauma, hate, fear, and labels this week. Just as a note, don't worry too much about the topic. It sounds heavy, it's not as heavy as you'd think. It's just us creating an understanding of why we come to these, reasoning why we hate something or where some traumas might come from that lean into that. Anyway, it all comes around together. So don't panic. It's not super heavy, but it is something for you to take a look at. It is also going to help you as you are writing your narrative, okay? Please make sure you are doing all of the readings. I'm going to try and make my part as short as possible so that way you make sure that you do the readings. I'm not going to give away all the answers, but they are in the lecture notes and they are in the actual readings. You will be using Obituary. It is a chapter from Wild Meat and the Bully Burgers written by Lois Ann Yamanaka. It's one of my hands down favorite books. And Rags is another chapter from Wild Meat and the Bully Burgers. But it's written in Hawaiian Creole. So if you're not quite sure what that is, don't worry. After my lecture, I'm going to actually give you a couple of videos on what that sounds like. So when you go to read, you can hear that dialect in your ear. Also make sure you read all the way through the Me Talk Pretty One Day by David Sedaris. You'll also notice that I include Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I include post-traumatic growth, the psychology of hate and why people hate, just so that we can get a full understanding of all the things. Again, we're in that unit of experience and identity, and oftentimes all of this comes down to labels and how we label ourselves, and so on and so forth. So please make sure, I'm gonna pause. So if you haven't gone and done the readings, you can pause me and then come back. Okay, we're back. Let's see here. So first and foremost, you want to take a look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What's important here is understanding what each part of the triangle tier stand for. We got psychological needs, safety and security, love and belonging, self-esteem, and self-actualization. It is important to recognize that to have a good, sturdy triangle or base, look at the biggest part right there, that psychological needs. That's the biggest part in a lot of, things that need to be met in order for somebody to be able to live, right? It's important to pay attention to that, especially when we think of later when we do our research report on humanity, and we'll talk more about the topics, but keep in mind Maslow's hierarchy of needs and why it's important that psychology needs are important to be met. That's breathing, food, water, shelter, clothing, sleep, the bare necessities, the absolute basics of survival. And that's just something to consider when you do your research, depending on your topics. Also, we have safety and security, health, employment, property, family, and social ability, your ability to interact with others and communicate and be a part of. Next, we have love and belonging, which is our friendships, family intimacy, and a sense of connection. That right there, we're going to talk about in a second when we talk about hate. Okay, we have self-esteem, same thing, that actually always applies to hate too. That is confidence, achievement, respect of others, the need to be a unique individual. And then last but not least, our very top one, self-actualization, which is morality, creativity, spontaneity, acceptance, experience, purpose, meaning, and inner potential. So that's the hierarchy. The biggest thing is recognizing when your first psychological needs are not met, nothing else matters. Okay, when you don't have, if you can't breathe, obviously, if you don't have your food, you don't have your water, your shelter, if you're not, able to sleep, if you don't have clothes, what really matters at that point, right? So that's something to really consider as we move forward. I just bring that up because I know right now there's a lot going on in the world, and it's important that we recognize the needs of others and what are some of the most basic needs and why that matters, especially when it comes to wondering why some people might not partake in community or care about the rest of the world. Maybe they have their needs of water, food, shelter, clothes. Those things probably aren't being met, and so their first instinct is survival. So, all right, take a look more on the details of those. Next, we're going to talk about traumas. So, You'll see there's like a pictorial or a little picture on the lecture notes that includes different types of traumas. You'd be surprised at what would be on that list. Let me kind of give you a little bit on there. Got to scroll. Um, we have traumas that we know are big traumas, maybe emotional abuse, infidelity, poverty. There's a lot of like things that we might consider big traumas. I know for me, a big trauma was my hometown paradise burning down, that sort of thing. But then there's other things that are traumas that oftentimes get overlooked. Things like undiagnosed, maybe learning disabilities, maybe having multiple losses, being unemployed, burnout, infertility. These things, take a look at traumas that we often invalidate, because it's really important to recognize that sometimes we have things that happen to us that others or maybe society might just be like, suck it up, buttercup. And you're like, hold on, that really messed me up though. So it's important to recognize that you could consider something small traumas and you could consider something big traumas, but you also need to recognize that they are still traumas. They are still things that affect our physical, mental, emotional needs, okay? And that it is a part of that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Things are still being taken out of that when we have certain traumas. So just be mindful of that. For some, you might think that this is a small trauma, but for me, it is a very big trauma. And I have what you call emetophobia, and it is a fear of throwing up. And it is all encompassing my whole life. Like, confession, I don't want to have kids because I don't want to have morning sickness, or I don't want to be around kids if they're throwing up. That's emetophobia. Well, some people might be like, oh, but throwing up is only this little thing. For me, it is big. It's like fear of snakes, fear of heights, fear of dark, whatever. It's big, it's all encompassing, and it really does affect my entire life. And so for me, I would consider that a big trauma. But many people might consider that a little trauma. It doesn't really mean that much to them. So when we talk about these things, undermining what happened to somebody is, disrespectful, right? Like, we need to recognize that all peoples go through things, and this is why we go and talk about our experiences, because maybe, what happened to me, people might undermine it, and my whole life suffering, right? Until one day I meet someone and they're like, oh my God, me too. And I'm like, yeah, you too? And then we can talk it out and figure out maybe some solutions to some of our problems. Like, I open doors with my elbow, and because you can't lick your elbow. Anyway, so when we think about big traumas and little traumas, they all matter. They all matter because they affect us in some way, and they change who we are, change our values, change our belief systems, all of it, okay? I would like you to take a look in the book Wild Meat and the Bully Burgers. There's 2 chapters where Lovey, that's the name Lovey, she experiences different traumas. The first one in Obituary, she has an English teacher, and she experiences some pretty big trauma with that. I don't want to give it away here, but you got to read it. It's also in the notes. So please take a look at that. She also has a second trauma with the rags, with the, what do you call it? The chapter of rags. And as a female, it is like, wow, girl, I get you, because we live in a society in which having your period is like, oh God, I don't want to talk about it. Oh, gross. But as a female, you're like, but I cannot help this. It's healthy that I have one, right? It's a healthy thing, but yet we still turn it around. We make it gross. Like, it's a huge, God, poor Lovey when you read the chapter. And if you are, a male who maybe has not, gone through that kind of trauma during puberty, maybe there was other things. Maybe it was, you're sitting in class and all of a sudden you're like, oh, dude, I can't stand up right now. What do I do? Like, that's embarrassing, right? These are traumas. You didn't ask for it to happen. Your body just did it. I always make the joke, my younger brother was really excited when he hit puberty. He's like, Mom, look, I got a pube. And she's like, what? Doink. She pulled it right out of his armpit. Anyway, for him, he was very excited about it. Mom goes and does her thing. Anyway, these are just our experiences that we have as our bodies change. Oh, so much is going on. Things we've never experienced before. Lovey has never experienced her period, right? And so the ways in which she's handling it probably isn't the best. And this is her mother's first daughter going through it. So the mom doesn't really handle it very well. And the sister, Calhoun is the sister. And Calhoun, she's going along with it because she's the younger sister and hasn't experienced it yet. All right, so I imagine as Lovey gets older, she has her sister goes through it, she would probably act differently, right? Anyway, the whole reason why we have these conversations, and I kind of gave some of the answers away, is so that we can recognize that everyone has some trauma in their life. So like David Sedaris has a very specific trauma. He has a lisp. All right. And he was growing up in North Carolina. All right. You got a lisp in North Carolina. Why do you think they might go out of their way to make sure that David Sedaris doesn't have a lisp in North Carolina? Okay. I'm really hoping you get that. So I want you to be specific on why it matters that David Sedaris had a lisp and the location where he was growing up, and why it mattered that they were trying to help him get rid of it. What were they really trying or hoping to get rid of? Okay. What kind of trauma was he experiencing? And my question to you is, when you look at these two, did either of them have a growth or fixed mindset towards their situations? A fixed mindset would say, I don't have any way of fixing this. I will be this way forever. I'll be dumb forever. I'll be like this forever. Or was it, let me find a way to work around this? Okay. Try not to give away the answers because I really do want you to read these stories because I'm looking for specifics. I'm going to be looking for specifics in your answers. Okay. Again, please do the readings. They're just fun readings and I really like them and I just want to share them with you. I mean, I'll be honest with you, since you're watching this video, with the psychology of hate and why do people hate, y'all, I gave you the answer. The Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I give you the answer in the lecture notes. The only things I really need you to read are the obituary, the rags, and David Sedaris' Me Talk Pretty One Day. That's it. All right, so make your life super easy. And since you watched this, there you go. Okay, that's really all you have to do. The psychology of hate, why do people hate? I have all the notes there. Those are the only things you really need to work at. You don't really have to really click through all the links. I mostly have them there so you see where I got the information. Okay, that being the case, we just went through traumas, right? We just recognized that people are going through these traumas and things. And what happens is, and we talk about bullying, right? Why do people bully? Oftentimes people bully is because one, they've been bullied, or two, they're afraid of being bullied, right? So they're trying to do it before it comes at them. And maybe they're afraid someone's going to see something in them. Let's talk about Lovey, right? So Lovey and Phyllis, she called her name's Phyllis, but she says Phyllis. Lovey is picking on Phyllis because Lovey is not very good at math. And the stereotype is that because Lovey is Japanese American, Japanese are supposed to be really good at math. And so she's getting picked on about it. What's the first thing that Lovey does? She points her finger at Phyllis, right? At Phyllis. And she's like, oh, well, look at Phyllis. And then she makes a big thing and she deters to someone else, right? And it's because Phyllis, remember, she's got the eraser all up in her nose. And so Lovey makes a big deal. Everyone's making fun of her, right? Projection. All right, please don't be that person. All right, so that's what Lovey ends up, doing, and of course creating a trauma for poor Phyllis. And what's the thing that Lovey does when she gets home and she's working on her math homework sitting at the table? She takes the eraser and does exactly what Phyllis does, right? Puts it in her nose. So anyway, why does Lovey do this? Why does Lovey create this? Well, she is full of fear. Okay, she's full of fear. She's embarrassed that she's not good at math because she has some, for some reason, your heritage matters about how, you do math, right? Versus when we talk about experience, right? She just doesn't have the experience based on her schooling, okay? So when we talk about the psychology of hate, hate is the absence of understanding. Hate is the absence of love, obviously, but it is also rooted in fear, majority of the time, actually, I'm going to say 100% of the time, hate comes from fear. Hate comes from some sort of fear in some way. Fear of something getting taken away, fear of being seen in some way, just fear, 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 fear. That is where hate comes from. So what Lovey was doing was based on fear, okay? When we talk about hate, we talk about, you can look at the psychology of hate, but we're going to talk, why do people hate? And in the notes we have, 1, 2, 3, 4, we'll do 5. 5 different reasons why people hate. First one, fear of others, right? We often will make, and this is just kind of a human nature thing, there always needs to be an other. In religions, there's always an other. There's Satan, we got God, but then you have Satan, you have whoever, I don't really know a lot of religion stuff, sorry. But majority of the time, there is this evil, this other thing. And human nature, it's our innate in us to have this other that we can focus on, so that we can also have this structure of us. And we look at this other to be, make us feel superior. That's kind of what it comes from. All right, so hatred is driven by 2 key emotions of love and aggression. One, love for the in-group. That's the group that you are a part of. The one that's favored, whether it's your, church or kids at school, or any kind of group, right? Whatever group you feel a part of. And then that's your in-group. So it's a love for your in-group. And then 2, aggression for the out-group. Anyone who is not a part of your church, or not a part of your group, or not a part of your sports team, or your political views, or whatever the case may be, that is the out-group. That's the aggression there. The group that's been deemed as being different, dangerous. It's a threat to this group, okay? Fear of others. I'm afraid of that political view. I'm afraid of, that culture, or those people, or whatever the case may be. That's where hate comes from. It's literally just another form of fear. I love this, but you don't seem to fit here, so I'm going to hate you. That's where that comes from. We also have a fear of others. Fear of ourselves. Fear of others and a fear of ourselves. The things people hate about others are the things they fear within themselves. Okay, majority of that, I'm going to say pretty much 99% of the time, when there's something about someone else you don't like, it's usually something you don't like about yourself. I've been trying to prove that wrong, and guaranteed, nope, it always comes back to, oh, that's why. Okay. Also, we have a lack of compassion. That's another reason why we might hate. The antidote to hate is compassion. Okay. If you have compassion, it's really hard to hate. When you have understanding, it's really hard to hate. And then it fills the void. Joining groups that feel like a part of, again, whether it's, church isn't really what I mean to say. I'm just trying to think of groups. Churches, religious, affiliations, what else? Political affiliations, sport affiliations, anything to fill that void. Joining groups that feel a part of is a natural instinct to want to be a part of a group. If you are out, if we go back in time and we think about you're out in nature, you want a group. You don't want to be by yourself. If you're by yourself and something breaks, whether it's you or whatever, you want people around you. So our instinct is always to want to be a part of. It's just natural. The problem is we're taught to, quote unquote, hate the enemy, hate the tiger, hate anything that's not a part of this group. Fear it, right? It is different from us. And that's a part of the societal and cultural factor influences of why we might hate something. It all kind of comes together. It all comes down to fear. So please be mindful of that when you think of maybe things you might hate. Also, right after this, I'm going to play Brene Brown's Power of Vulnerability. Please take notes. If you haven't already been taking notes with this, always take notes. Hand-eye, do. Okay. Brene Brown, the reason why I say that is there's going to be a lot of questions in the play pause it that are in relation to the video I'm going to show you right after this. Also, you can take a look at understanding how we label things and why we label things. Oftentimes, the reason why we label things is very similar to kind of the reasons why we hate. We need to feel a part of. We need to make sense of things. Labeling helps us because otherwise it's scary not knowing what's out there. We need to know what is the thing we need to be mindful of, you know, whether it's a person or a thing or whatever the case may be. We label stuff so that we can feel safe. Okay, we talk about safety a lot. Let's see here. Take a look at the ladder of inference over there. We talk about observation, selecting data, adding meaning, making assumptions, drawing conclusions, forming beliefs, and taking actions. This is why we label, is so that we can gather data and know how to act. How do we need to be in the situation? Okay, that's a form of how we begin to label things, is the inference, ladder of inference. Okay. You take a look at that. I don't need to go all the way over it, but I'd like you to make sure you understand it really well. Below that, we actually also have a cartoon talking about the street calculus. Now, the reason why street calculus is really important in this particular thing is because we try and label things to understand what is a risk factor and what is a mitigating factor. Okay, when we're walking down the street, subconsciously, consciously, however the case may be, when we walk down, we're making aware of our environment, what's happening, what do we see, what's going on. And we do that again, as imagine we're out in the Serengeti, we're looking around, we want to make sure we know what is around us so that we're safe, so that we can know what we're going to do next. Do we need to run? Can we walk home safely? Is there someone acting weird? Is there something out there? Do I see a tiger or a dog? Or, what's the case? Tiger, can you imagine? Anyway, so this is like the whole point of why we're doing understanding street calculus. Now, street calculus in this particular sense actually refers more to when we're walking down the street and we see somebody coming at us, we're going to have a bunch of lists. And the two lists are going to be our risk factors and our mitigating factors. Now, the risk factors are going to be things where you're like, I don't know about that, versus our mitigating factors, which is like, oh, that's fine. That doesn't bother me. Take a look at how they do the mitigating and risk factors in this cartoon. And the two gentlemen who are walking past each other and they're looking at each other. What are the risk factors, right? They have a whole list and they have a checkbox next to which ones have been considered risk versus mitigating. So like the white guy carrying the groceries, his risk factors are, as the guys are, it's a white guy and a black guy and they're passing each other. The white guy's risk factors are the guy coming at him is black. He is male. He has a basketball cap on. Those are risk factors, and there's about 3 of them. Now, the mitigating factors, he is wearing loafers, he's whistling, and he has a FedEx envelope and a polo. So now we have 4. The mitigating outweighs the risk factors, so he considers that the risk is acceptable. It's safe. He can walk past this guy. He doesn't have any worries. These are things that often go through our mind. For the black guy, his risk factors are that the guy he's about to pass is white, he's in the wrong neighborhood, and what's the other one? And he's a male. Those are the 3. Now his mitigating, his safety, I guess you would call it, factors are that he's white, that he has groceries, he's humming Motown, and then he's over 40. So those are mitigating factors. Now when we look at street calculus, are these, stereotypes? Are these potentially, racist? Absolutely. Unfortunately, absolutely. Because when we are considering risk factors as we're walking down streets, we're pulling from data that we only know from our either experience or what other people have told us or things like that. And unfortunately, oftentimes, based on our values and our experiences and our beliefs, things that we see oftentimes become racist or biased or kind of ignorant because we just don't know. And sometimes we just don't know, and we're just pulling from the data that we do know. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying this is what we do as humans. This is why it's important when we talk about hate comes from a lack of understanding. The more you know, the better. It's kind of like snakes. If you know all the snakes and you know which ones are poisonous and which ones aren't, you are less likely to freak out anytime you see a snake. Same with spiders. If you don't like spiders, a lot of it comes from the fact that you just don't know what that spider is going to do. So your first instinct is take care of self, kill it, right? I try not to kill anything, spiders, unless they're black widows. I know. I don't know, it's probably hypocritical. All right. All right, so take a look also, Some of the vocabulary we have is label, what a label is. It's a way we name, it's a name, a word, or a phrase that we use to classify or categorize maybe a person or a thing. And they are, but not always, inaccurate. Oftentimes, again, just like I just said, these labels we put out there are for us because we don't know what else to do, so we have to put a label on it to feel safe, okay? Also take a look at assumptions. Assumptions make an ass out of you and me, right? Assume, making an assumption. And then a stereotype, okay? And then please take a look at some of the rest of these notes. One thing I want to make a note of is sometimes we put labels on ourselves because we want those labels. We want to be seen as that. We want to be identified as whatever it is. Like a teacher, I'll be honest with you, I like to label myself as a teacher. Even if I do all these other jobs and do any of this other stuff, my first label that I put on myself is a teacher. Well, a female, but teacher, right? But these are the ways in which I label myself. And that's important, right? It matters to me how you address me because I choose said label, okay? It's important. And sometimes labels, even if they're negative, people will still accept them, okay? And you might want to even ask yourself, what kind of labels do you give yourself? And why might you do that? Is it because you want to feel a part of, right? Maybe it fills a void, right? Maybe there are things that you do because you want to be seen as a certain way, okay? All right, I didn't include the, I'm not going to include the video intersectionality. You can take a look at that. It's another understanding of how labels can actually be harmful because you can be labeled in two ways and still fall between the cracks. So please take a look at the quote from the TED Talk here. You don't have to watch the whole video, but it is really, really interesting and really, really important, especially again when we are talking about labels, and understanding with labels comes hate, right? And sometimes with labels comes trauma. I do remember I cut my hair really, really short when I was in 8th grade, and I was trying to look like Maggie from Northern Exposure. I'm aging myself. I know none of you know any of that show. Anyway, I thought it would be cool. Turns out it wasn't in 8th grade, and then I was labeled many things, but one of my nicknames was Kyle. And I was very traumatized from that. And so I went out of my way not to look like a boy and put on dresses and do my, well, what was left of my hair, right? Because I didn't want to be seen as a boy, I wanted to be seen as a girl. I thought it would be cute, but it did not come off that way. And so I'm very traumatized by that. Not anymore. I mean, I was, you know, it took me some time, but for a while it really messed me up. And that's why labels can be very, very harmful. And people, I don't know why they wanted to do that. You know, what they did was very hateful and very cruel, the things that they would say to me, and they'd throw things at me. And, you know, that's, you know, they were afraid of me for some reason. Maybe I was just too outlandish with my hair. Maybe they wanted to point the finger so that they couldn't see, you know, their flaws. Look at Kylene, she got short hair. Don't look at me, you know, because it's junior high, man. We're afraid of everything. Our feet stink, our arms stink, everything stinks, and we're weird, and we're, you know, growing, and things are coming out of us. So of course you're going to bully in junior high. Just look at Lovey, right? Exactly what Lovey does. So anyway, sorry I went a little long. No, it's good. I did good. I stayed within 30 minutes. I try. But after this, you have a couple other videos. I'm going to show you what pigeon looks like so that when you do the Wild Meat and the Bully Burgers readings, it makes sense. And then also the Brene Brown Power of Vulnerability. The reason why we do everything that we do is exactly in what Brene Brown is trying to talk about, in understanding vulnerability. So all the things that I have told you today are absolutely some of my most vulnerable statements. So I hope that instead of turning it against me, you recognize like, oh, me too, in some way, shape, or form. I don't know. Anyway, as Pete Ross over here in his painting says, I can't afford to hate people. I don't have that kind of time. So, all right, please message me if you have questions. Do all the readings, at least if you're going to do, of all the readings, please make sure you look at the lecture notes because that's going to be a part of the quiz. Make sure you do the Wild Meat and the Bully Burgers, both Obituary, Rags, and David Sedaris's Me Talk Pretty One Day, and you are good to go. So, yeah, we're doing good, guys. Oh, jeez.